Well, hello. Thanks for joining me and welcome to yet another episode of Adventures in Woods. Now, I don't know where this path goes. I just thought I'd take it and see. I've already been out for quite some time. I've filmed 3 other videos, which, if you like and subscribe and then go into my past videos, you'll see this. You'll see some more, I mean. And you'll also see this, because this will no doubt be listed. So hello everyone, hope you're all well, and I hope this brings you a lot of joy, because today has been very kind so far. And I am somewhere that is so beautiful that I don't have words for it. That's how beautiful it is. Now, it is possible that I may have to turn around and follow the same path back, but it'll look different. Well, the subject of today's lecture, I've never, oh, look at the buttresses, look at those, wow, amazing, that's what props it up, especially on a slope. This is quite a slopey woodland with all kinds of stuff in here. It's got just about everything, I think, that you could want. Now, I've been wanting to talk about this subject for a while, because this is, I want to talk about, well, people often say to me, aside from get out of our garden, they say that, ooh, is that a thrush? Don't know, seemed like it. They say, oh, you're lucky to live where you are, you're lucky you work in a place like that. You know, those kind of things. It's been said to me many times. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I'm grateful for everything in my life. It's been fantastic. But I haven't done it the way that we've been taught. And that's been the thing. I'm sure, ooh, look at that. Looks beautiful out there in the sea of garlic. Sea of dying garlic. You know, the nature, the universe has a balance, doesn't it? Yeah? Everything balances out. Everything. So if you have, say, well, let's take a rock star, for example, or a band. They have great highs, they get famous, they go and travel all around the world, they make millions of pounds. But the downside of that, and you know, most people wouldn't swap their lives. The downside of that is the boredom, the hanging around, the never being at home, the missing your children growing up, the taking of drugs just to get through the day, you know, for that hit of being on stage. You know, some might say it's the price, but then there's a balance. And then when the band splits up, as it often does, you know, they're left with, oh, what do I do now? And they go into a period of great depression. You know, I mean, I don't even really need to continue along this path, do I? Because I'm sure most of you will get that already and have probably had it in your lives. You know, no one's immune from these things. So let's give you a bit of, to go into this further. I decided after the bean field, or even before the bean field actually, that I couldn't, yeah, it was probably when I was at school. And I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I doing all these lessons? You know, because I was highly intelligent and I was in all the top groups. And then I kind of went, well, what am I doing it for? You know, do what? Go to university so I can then get a job, be paid lots of money for working all the time for somebody else to make lots of money. And I just thought that's wrong, you know. So I wanted to do a different way. It felt right. And the way I thought was, well, if I'm not going to be earning lots of money, if I live in a bus, you know, I can go from place to place if I wanted, or even stay in the same place. Yeah. Now those things aren't synonymous with scrounging off the dole, as some people put it. They're not. You can easily live in a bus on a campsite and work. And there's never been a time when I haven't done anything. Even when I wasn't working, I was spending 8 hours a day practicing juggling to become really good at it. Yeah, 8 hours a day. Most days. And then, well, the bean field happened, and everything seemed to change. There was all this violence directed towards anyone who was slightly different, or a lot different, or looked like a New Age traveller, or a hippie, or anything connected with Stonehenge. Anyone who didn't look normal, you know, average, you know, for want of a better expression. And this was all propagated, the propaganda by the media all the time. They'd even set up photographs that were complete lies to tell you, you know, to tell the general public that all travellers were awful. And you know, so much discrimination, especially as I grew up near Stonehenge. That's where I lived. That's where you know, that's where my roots are, in a way. My modern roots are near Avebury and Stonehenge. So, you know, yeah, there's an upside. I lived in one of the most magical areas of Britain, possibly the world. So, I'm not going to swap anything for that. Now, some of the downsides, well, let's look at, some of the other sides. Well, so then after lots of trying creative endeavours to earn money, which, you know, I sold all my stuff, my Celtic paintings, my jacket appeared on Midsummer Murders, my furniture sold. You know, it just wasn't in great numbers to completely support myself. I didn't like performing as a juggler, so that didn't go very well. So that only had a short span. But I did have, you know, I did inspire other jugglers, certainly with the scripts that they stole from me, or parts of scripts. Yep, I've written scripts. So I thought, well, you know, the only real honest work is with nature. And as I didn't want to be in an office, if I'm not making money through creativity, actually, no, that's not what happened. And this is an example of what may be considered my accidental, lucky psychic life. We were having a party in our garden, and a friend came round, and I was at a point where I was like, well, what do I do, you know? If the internet had been here, then I could have been easily selling my creations, but I'm not in the position to be doing it now. I'm not that person anymore. We all change as we get older. And a friend came round and he said, oh, I'm looking for people to help me. I'm going to start up a gardening business, or working in nature business. Do you want to, you know, do you want some work? Do you want to come and join me? So I said, yeah, and we did. And well, one of my first jobs was working in the woodland. And that's where my working life in the woodlands started. It was quite, you know, there were other places, but they were all big places in the country. You know, because I didn't get any town work for a number of years. Anyway, in all these years, so I'm working in these beautiful places, but the work is so hard that every night you're wiped out, and by the time the weekend comes, you can't do anything. You don't feel like doing anything. You're wiped out, honestly, wiped out badly. So you don't have any kind of life. So your partners are there going, oh, can we go for a walk? Come on, let's go for a walk. Oh, don't just sit there, blah blah blah. You know, that's what happens. I've spoken to lots of outdoor workers, male outdoor workers, who do hard work because it's a sexist occupation. You know, gardening and woodlands, women get given the easy jobs relatively. You know, they're not wielding machines around, or, you know, in gardens they're dealing with plants usually. You know, some of them do other things, but, you know, they don't do, there are designated man jobs and women jobs, or chores, work, you know, however you want to describe it. You know, no woman really gets asked to dig up an old tree or a huge shrub. Men get asked to do that. And then being self-employed has also meant that I've had long periods without any work. You know, one time went on for 7 weeks because every day it rained so badly that I couldn't do the job that I was doing. And obviously any others were all rained off as well because I'm working outside. Now the other thing that has been running against me, and there are another 2 things that I can think of. One is that I was often without a vehicle, which actually taught me mechanics from doing my bus and getting that all legal and roadworthy. So it taught me lots about mechanics. You know, I've rebuilt a bus, I've rebuilt Volkswagen campers, I have changed engines in cars, I've cut cars apart in order to get them on a trailer to take them to the scrapyard. You know, I've had my bus on blocks, put it in gear and let the clutch out so the back wheels spin, and then I've gone underneath it just to check everything out. Yeah, I can't believe some of the things I've done. Yeah, I used to help get the Amebix van, tour van, ready with this bloke who taught me loads about mechanics. Actually, it was fantastic. Known as Old Bill. Taught me so much about mechanics, and lots of little tricks, as well as being funny and interesting. Lots of funny stories to tell about him. That'll be another video, I think. I mean, lots. So, you know, having no transport and living in the places I've lived is quite difficult. So, to my living, well, I've been homeless 8 times. Yep, that's correct. 8. But on the other side of it, I've lived in a castle, I've lived in a wooden house, I've lived in a showman's wagon, I've lived in a bus, I've lived in a Volkswagen camper, I've lived in a 300-year-old cottage, I've lived in an old tiny cottage, which is where I am now, which is amazing. It's actually underground. Yeah, I live with the gnomes. The trolls are opposite. The fairies have started hanging out behind, and the gnomes occasionally pop round. The Gimliites. Amazing. Started off raining, so I had to have an umbrella out, and now it's going to warm up and get quite muggy. Yeah, so I've lived in these places, but then I've had periods of homelessness, you know. I've slept on a floor for 2 years whilst doing the work I do. You know, I haven't claimed benefit and got off my head on drugs, so I'd be going out working, coming home wiped, and I couldn't just go to bed. I'd have to wait until it seemed a reasonable time to go to bed, and then go to bed, you know, if you're on someone's floor. Luckily, they stayed away for quite a lot. Now, is that toothwort, or is that a different one? Because that looks different to my... Yeah, that's different, isn't it? What is that? Does anyone know? Doesn't look like an orchid to me, but maybe it is. I don't know. What's the leaves like? Doesn't have any. Well, they're clear actually. Can you see? Yeah. Don't know. And yeah, so it's not the easiest of things to cope with for 2 years. There have been other times. I used to spend a lot of time in my car. And it's interesting, if you drive to like secret locations around the back roads and little pull-ins and just little off-road areas, you'll find that very often there's just single men sat there in their cars, which I always thought was odd. We're not talking dogging here, we're just talking they were on their own. I'd pull up in another one because you see someone sat in a car, people are quite suspicious and think something dodgy is going on when it probably isn't. So, but the highs, I mean, sometimes I only lived in a house for 2 years and then I've been homeless again. And not because I can't pay my rent, it's been nothing to do with me not paying my rent or my bills. It's always been to do with what the landlords wanted to do with the house. And so now I'm in a place, amazing though it is, where I have no rights. I'm seen as just a lodger. They can turn up at any time they like. I mean, well, they don't, but they have sent people to look at work or look at things without informing me that they might be coming. But they are pretty good on sorting things out if I ask. If I say, the boiler's broken, and then they'll get it done as quickly as possible. So that's not that's not a problem. But also, I'm watched. My movements are watched all the time, and I know because I can feel it. Just in case I might be breaking the rules that you have to adhere to live where I live. It's looked down on from behind the house that looks down into the kitchen and bathroom and through into my landing window, as well as opposite that can look down into my front room and down into my bedroom. So the only place where I have absolute privacy is behind the front door and the first 10 stairs of my stairs, where no one can accidentally or on purpose look into my house and see me. And also I could, if they wanted to, I could get 2 hours notice to move out, to leave. I've had all my possessions in a pile on someone's lawn, and then over the next sort of few weeks I've burnt lots of them that will burn. Burnt my possessions or thrown them away. Yep. So, I live in a place that has wood lice and slugs everywhere because it's underground, and there's nothing you can do about it. Every day there are dozens of slugs in the bathroom and in the kitchen. Every night. And even in the front room floor. My bath is a tiny bath. There's lots of aspects about my life that other people wouldn't have or wouldn't put up with. But then that's what gives me the life that I've had and the access that I've had to nature hard as the work is, some of the places I work in are just absolutely magical. And on sacred springs or ancient settlements. So I wouldn't swap it. I wouldn't swap it. But it's not easy. I'm probably in a state of high tension. High tension line. Step down. Comment if you know what that was. Oh no, I've now got it going through my head. And as a result, it's meant that I'm aching everywhere. Yeah, because I don't get, after my first day's work, I don't get the necessary time for my muscles to relax before I went out and did it again. And now all I am is just I'm putting one, you know, I'm tiring myself more every time. I tire myself out, I have a slight break, a sort of rapid sleep, which is going to be the subject of another video, because no one, unless you're an outside worker who does physical work, you don't know what happens, you know, if you're not doing it full time. And I'm doing it full time, you know, all year round, or have been. So, you know, 8 hours having some sleep isn't long enough for your muscles to totally relax, so you go out and you work again, so it's compounded. So you don't need 8 hours to relax, you then need 16, you know, and then you do a next day, and then the next day. Yeah, I couldn't have done 5-day week. I'd have been dead. I'd been, you know, it would have caused me so much pain and distress. Which then brings me on to the work. Yeah, it's great to be working in nature, but let's put it this way, it's really badly paid. No one else would be doing what I do for the pay that I get. If there was an equivalent in an office, no one would be doing that. They just wouldn't. I know they wouldn't. So if I can give you an example of, you know, I know it's an extreme example. Imagine you go and dig for 8 hours. Then the next day you go and dig for 8 hours. And then the next day you go and dig for 8 hours. And then the next day you go and dig for 8 hours, right? Then you're sleeping on someone's floor, and you've also got to find yourself somewhere to live, as well as rest. Yeah. And then, you know, the weekend's over, and then you're back. You know, okay, maybe not, it might not be digging, but it'll be doing something else that's equally repetitive. It's just, and then you don't get paid well. And people say, oh, a lovely job. Well, in theory, probably is. You know, I know someone who I hadn't seen for, well, 10, maybe a lot more, maybe 20 years. And I bumped into him. He said, oh, what are you up to? I said, oh, I'm doing sort of woodland garden, you know, gardening. And he said, oh, I always wanted to be a gardener, but the pay's so shit. I said, yeah, I know. You know, so people do things for money rather than for how good the work is, which is a sad state, isn't it? You know, really, because there are a lot of jobs that are bullshit jobs, but then there are other jobs that are just really useful, but the really useful jobs are probably the least well paid, which has always struck me as well, not interesting, but just weird. and wrong. So there you go, that's upsides and downsides. You see, my upsides are amazing, my downsides are really awful, and in between I have long periods of mundanity and boredom. Yeah, really, honestly. Punctuated by these extreme peaks. But it has meant, one of the really good things is, because I have an active mind and I'm highly intelligent and quick, bright, I think they call it, I'm not at work being bored digging the ground, I'm thinking about stuff. You know, I probably plan all these videos in my mind and formulate my script, as it were, well before I even switch the camera on, and it could have been over years, you know, because I've been thinking of doing this video for years. Yeah, I can't, because I've started calling myself a woodland gardener, because that's what I do. I'm not a gardener, I don't work in suburban towns, you know, 14 acres, 10 acres, sometimes, you know, you walk half a kilometre to get to the bit you're working on. You know, so just walking somewhere takes it out of you, doesn't it? Yeah, especially as you're probably pushing a barrow or a cart loaded with tools. You know, and the other thing that people think is, if the weather's warm or hot, it must be great to do what I do. I think if you speak to most woodland workers, they would say no. Nice cool days are better for working. And like, if you have a summer day that's been hot and then it rains like we've had now, well, that just makes it muggy. That's just as bad. Yeah, the only decent gardening weather, as far as I'm concerned, is 10 degrees, cloudy and still, maybe with a slight breeze. So back to where we started, eh? So yeah, I hope I haven't given the impression that I hate my life, because far from it. If I hadn't had the life I had, I wouldn't know the things I know, and I wouldn't be here now doing this, which is something that I love more than anything I've done in my life. Yeah, aside from the obvious, of course. So thanks for watching, and yeah, if you want to donate, that would be fantastic. It'd really help me out. You know, it doesn't have to be loads. You know, if 2,000 people gave everyone, you know, if everybody had £10 from 2,000 people, we'd all be okay to live, wouldn't we? Well, you know, assuming that this massive price increase on everything to push us over the edge. Yeah, you know, I don't even need to finish that sentence, do I? Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ta-da. Oh, that's such a beautiful scene.